Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com. Today we're going to make a cranberry pear apple crumble, also known as a crisp. And this is what it looks like. You have the fruit on the bottom, and then on top you have this delicious streusel-like mixture. And as the streusel bakes, it becomes all nice and crisp and crumbly. And that's where the names crumble and crisp have come from. So we're going to begin by preheating our oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 190 degrees Celsius. And then you will need either, you can use, like I have here, an 8-inch square, which is 20 centimeter square baking pan, or you could also use a 9-inch, 23 centimeter round pan. And I like to have the depth of either size pan, about 2 inches, which is about 5 centimeters. And you can use like earthenware or ceramic, glass, metal, you know, whatever you have. But, you know, depending on like each of these pans, the surface of what it's made of will conduct heat differently. So depending on which type you're using, your baking time may vary just a little bit. So just keep that in mind. And so what we want to do is either butter our pan, which I'm going to do here, or you could just spray it with one of those non-stick sprays. And I've just melted a little bit of butter, and then I'm using a pastry brush to brush the inside, like so. And then we'll start by making our streusel topping. You could do this in your food processor, and that makes it really fast and easy, but I'm going to do it by hand. So in a bowl, I have a half a cup, 65 grams of all-purpose flour. You may know that as plain flour. And to that, I'm going to add a half a cup, 100 grams of firmly packed light brown sugar. And as always, you know, kind of run your fingers through your brown sugar because it does have a tendency to have lumps. And then to that, I'm also going to add a half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon because streusel and cinnamon, to me, just has to have that ground cinnamon in there. And then I'm adding just a quarter of a teaspoon of salt. And then just mix that. And like I said, you could just process that in your food processor. And then I'm going to add, we need some butter. And you will need 6 tablespoons, which is 85 grams of cold butter. And I mean, you can use, as you know, I like unsalted, but you could use salted, whatever you have in the house. And then cut it into small pieces because we're going to cut the butter into the flour. And if you have it in small pieces, it's a lot easier to do than if you had a big, you know, block of butter. And then I'm going to cut the butter into the flour with one of these pastry blenders. It's a really great tool. You could also use 2 knives, or you could even use your fingertips. And what we're going to do is just cut it in until we have like coarse crumbs. Okay, that looks about right. So as you can see, we have a crumbly mixture. So my scraper all scraped off. And then what we're going to add is about half a cup, which is 50 grams of rolled oats. I like to use the old-fashioned rolled oats because they have a little thicker texture. Because you can also use the quick cooking if that's all you have, but it's just thinner texture. And then I'm going to add nuts, is very good with the apples and the pears. So I'm adding 1/3 of a cup, 35 grams of chopped nuts. Now, I'm using walnuts because I really like walnuts with apples and pears. But you could use, I mean, pecans, you could use almonds, hazelnuts, really whatever you want. Or really, if you didn't want to use nuts, you can just leave it out. And then just stir that in. Now, you could make your streusel ahead of time if you wanted to. Like say you're having company and you wanted to at least do prep beforehand, you could make this cover and store it in the fridge for, you know, a couple days. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to prepare our fruit. So now for our fruit, you will need 1.5 pounds, 700 grams of both apples and pears. And for the apples, start with the apples. You want to use a firm textured apple that will keep its shape as it bakes. And I'm using, you can use one type of apple or you could use a couple. And I find that adds, you know, even more, you know, flavor to your crumble. So I'm using a Braeburn and a Granny Smith. You could use like a Golden Delicious, a Jonagold, Jonathan, Stayman Wine Sap, the Honey Crisp. I mean, really, and especially if it's in the fall and fresh apples, you know, if you go to the farmer's market, get whatever type grows in your area. So I'll just show you how I cut and peel an apple. I always just take it and then just cut it down the center, and then I just take a sharp knife and cut on either side of the core. And then like so, and then you're just left with the core. I mean, there's different ways to do it, but I find this the fastest. And then what I do is just take a paring knife and just cut the peel off. If you have a little bit of peel in your crumble, I don't mind that. Just adds a little more texture. And then once you have them all peeled, then you want to cut them into about 1 inch, which is 2.5 centimeter chunks or thereabouts. And I just kind of eyeball it. And then you just want to put everything into a large bowl. And then for your pears, again, you could use one type or different types. Bartlett are good, Anjou are good, and I particularly like the Bosque. It's firm textured, it keeps its shape, and I think that's a good match to the Granny Smith and the Braeburn, but again, that's, you know, personal preference. And you could use like 1 or 2 types. So when I do a pear, I just cut the top and the bottom off, and then I actually use like just a vegetable peeler to peel off the skin. And then I just, again, you have the core in the center, so I'm just going to cut down around that. And again, we're doing in 1 inch chunks. That way the apples and the pears will, you know, bake in the same amount of time. Okay, so that's our apples and our pears, and then of course there's cranberries. So depending on the time of year, right now, you know, where I live, I can't get the fresh cranberries, so I'm using dried. So I'm using 1/3 cup of dried cranberries, about 45 grams. You could use, if you don't want cranberries, I mean, you could use cherries for this. Dried cherries would be very nice. And then, of course, we need a little bit of sugar, depending on your fruit. Somewhere, you know, it's hard to say exactly how sweet do you want it. Somewhere between 1 and 3 tablespoons, which is about 15 to 40 grams of light brown sugar. I'm not adding a lot because I don't like it too sweet, personally. And then I'm just adding like just a pinch, 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. And then, depending on the type of apples and pears you're using, you could add a bit of a thickener. I'd say about, maybe up to 2 teaspoons of cornstarch. You may know that as corn flour. Because of I'm using the Bosc pears, which are very firm textured, and my Granny Smith and my Braeburn, I made this yesterday, and I didn't bother with the cornstarch because I actually like a little juice. Now, if you're using a fruit a pear or an apple that lets off a lot of juice, you may want to add a little bit of a thickener. But I really like the juice to pour over the top, especially when I'm serving with ice cream. So now we're just going to pour that into our dish, level the top, and then I'm just going to take our topping and put it over top. If you're going to take, the reason I use this dish is, it makes a nice presentation. So I can take this right to the table to serve and let everybody help themselves. As opposed to if I just used a metal one, I kind of go, well, maybe I don't want to take that to the table. So just level that off. So now what we're going to do is bake it somewhere between 35 and 45 minutes. So what you're looking for, time is just one factor. What you're looking for is, the topping will be nice and golden brown and crisp. You'll start to see actually a little bit of juices bubbling around the edges. And if you take like a sharp paring knife and put it into the fruit, which is a really good sign, it'll be, you don't want it mushy, but you want it to just go in nice and easy. Okay, so our pear and apple and cranberry crumble is now done. Doesn't that look gorgeous? Beautiful golden brown color. And if I took a knife and just inserted it into the fruit, there's, there's a give, but it's not like mushy. So now what I want to do is just let it cool on a wire rack for at least like 15 minutes because it's a little too hot to serve right now. And then when we come back, we will try a piece. So now when you're ready to serve your crumble, you could serve it in bowls, plates, either one. I'm going for the more casual, so I'm using a bowl. Oh, and there we go. As you can see, I don't know whether you can see, but I used more firm textured fruit. So, and I didn't add any cornstarch, and yet, I have some juice, but I don't have like a lot. So, it really depends on the type of fruit you're using. So I need a little bit of that crumble. It's so good on the top. What a great tasting dessert. It's perfect for fall. You've got that, the apples, the pears. They're tender, but not mushy. And then you got that, the crunch of the streusel topping with the walnuts and the oats. And it's perfect. I find this is just, you could serve it year round, but especially in the fall and winter. The warm dessert, it just is a perfect ending to a meal. So try it. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.